12 human beings have walked on the moon, but nobody has ever lived there. When scientists finally sat down to calculate what it would actually cost to build a city up there, the number broke their models. In this video, we're going to cover everything. The real science of surviving on the moon, what your body would face the moment you stepped outside without protection, and the honest, unfiltered financial cost of turning that barren gray rock into a place where humans could actually call home. If questions like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe, because this is exactly what we do here. The moon has been staring down at humanity for 4.5 billion years. Long before the first human being ever looked up and wondered what that pale light in the sky actually was, the moon was already there, silently orbiting, pulling at our oceans, governing our tides, and watching civilizations rise and fall from a distance of roughly 239,000 miles. For most of human history, it was untouchable. A god, a myth, a lantern hung in the dark. And then, on July 20th, 1969, a man from Ohio stepped off a metal ladder and placed his boot into 4 inches of gray dust, and everything changed. Neil Armstrong did not just walk on a moon. He opened a door. The question we have been asking ever since is simple and terrifying in equal measure. What is behind that door, and can we afford to walk through it? To understand what it would take to build a city on the moon, you first need to understand what the moon actually is. Not the version from poetry books or children's fairy tales, but the real thing, the geological, physical, brutal truth of it. The moon formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago, roughly 30 to 50 million years after the solar system itself came into existence. The most widely accepted theory among scientists today is called the giant impact hypothesis. According to this model, a Mars-sized body, which scientists have named Theia, collided with the early Earth in a catastrophic impact so violent that the debris ejected into orbit eventually coalesced under its own gravity to form the moon. Think about that for a moment. The moon is, in a very real sense, a piece of Earth, torn away by violence, reformed in silence, and placed into a perfect orbit that would one day make life on our planet possible. The gravitational relationship between Earth and the moon stabilizes our axial tilt, which is what gives us predictable seasons. Without the moon, Earth's axis would wobble chaotically, and the climate as we know it would be unrecognizable. The moon is not just our neighbor. It is in many ways the reason we exist at all. But visiting it, let alone living there, is one of the most hostile propositions in the history of human ambition. The surface of the moon is a place that seems engineered to kill. There is no atmosphere. None. Not a thin one, not a seasonal one, nothing. The moon is wrapped in what scientists call an exosphere, an almost perfect vacuum so sparse that it barely registers as a gas at all. This has consequences that ripple through every single aspect of what it would mean to live there. Without an atmosphere, there is no pressure. The moment an unprotected human body is exposed to the lunar surface, the gases dissolve in the blood begin to expand. Fluids in the body start to vaporize. This process, known as ebulism, is as fast as it is fatal. You would not freeze first, you would not suffocate first. You would effectively boil from the inside out within seconds. This is not science fiction. This is physics. Without an atmosphere, the moon also has no protection from radiation. On Earth, we are shielded by a magnetic field and a thick blanket of air that absorbs and deflects the constant bombardment of cosmic rays and solar particles. The moon has no global magnetic field of its own. The surface is bombarded continuously by solar wind, ultraviolet radiation, and high-energy particles from deep space. A person standing on the lunar surface for a single day would receive a radiation dose somewhere between 100 and 200 times higher than the annual safe limit recommended for radiation workers on Earth. Over the course of a year, without specialized shielding, the cumulative radiation exposure would almost certainly be fatal. Every city we build on the moon will have to solve this problem first, before anything else. Then there is the temperature. Because there is no atmosphere to distribute heat, the moon experiences temperature swings that would seem impossible to most people on Earth. In direct sunlight, The surface reaches approximately 260 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to boil water. In the shade, or during the lunar night, which lasts approximately 354 hours, temperatures plunge to negative 280 degrees Fahrenheit. On Earth, even the most extreme environments experience temperature swings of maybe 180 degrees Fahrenheit between their hottest and coldest extremes. On the Moon, that swing is over 500 degrees, and it does not happen gradually. The transition from light to shadow near the terminator, the line between the lunar day and lunar night, can cause temperature changes of hundreds of degrees in just seconds. Any structure, any material, any piece of engineering exposed to the lunar surface must be designed to survive this repeatedly for years. The dust is another problem that most people never think about. Lunar regolith, the fine powdery material that covers the moon's surface, is nothing like the dust you find on Earth. On our planet, dust particles are worn smooth over time by wind, water, and interaction with other particles. The moon has none of those processes. Every grain of lunar dust is jagged, angular, and electrostatically charged by solar radiation. It sticks to everything. It gets into everything. During the Apollo missions, the astronauts found that lunar dust penetrated their equipment, scratched their visors, clogged their instruments, and irritated their lungs. Harrison Schmitt, the geologist who walked on the moon during the Apollo 17 mission in 1972, developed what he described as lunar hay fever after just a few hours on the surface. The dust is sharp enough to damage lung tissue at the microscopic level. In a lunar city where people would be going in and out of pressurized modules every day, managing lunar dust would be one of the most persistent engineering challenges imaginable. And yet, despite all of this, the moon is not just a graveyard of problems. It is also a world of extraordinary resources and strategic opportunity. Scientists now have very strong evidence that water ice exists in permanently shadowed craters near the lunar poles, regions where sunlight never reaches and temperatures stay permanently below negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite mission, conducted by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 2009, confirmed the presence of water ice on the moon by deliberately crashing a spacecraft into the Cabeus crater near the South Pole and analyzing the debris plume. What they found changed everything about how we think about long-term lunar habitation. Water is not just drinking water. Water can be electrolyzed, split into hydrogen and oxygen using electricity. That oxygen can be used for breathing. That hydrogen can be used as rocket fuel. A source of water on the moon means a source of life support and propulsion at the same time. It means a lunar city would not need to import every drop of water from Earth at astronomical cost. It could, in theory, mine it locally. The moon is also rich in helium-3, a rare isotope that barely exists on Earth, but has been deposited in the lunar regolith for billions of years by the solar wind. Scientists believe helium-3 could be an extraordinarily valuable fuel for nuclear fusion reactors, the kind that could power entire cities cleanly and indefinitely. The estimated amount of helium-3 on the moon is somewhere between 1 million and 5 million tons. The fusion energy that amount of helium-3 could theoretically produce is greater than all the fossil fuel energy humanity has ever consumed in its entire history. We have not yet achieved practical fusion power on Earth, but the race to do so is accelerating. And if we get there, the moon suddenly becomes the most valuable real estate in the solar system. Before any human being ever set foot on the moon, other creatures went first and not by choice. The story of animals in space is one of courage, tragedy, and genuine scientific contribution. The Soviet Union sent a stray dog named Laika into orbit aboard Sputnik 2 in November of 1957. She did not survive the mission. The technology to bring her back did not yet exist, but the data from her flight proved that a living creature could survive the forces of launch and the conditions of microgravity, at least for a time. Later missions sent mice, frogs, and insects into space. The United States sent chimpanzees. Ham, A chimpanzee trained at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico flew a suborbital mission in January of 1961, 4 months before Alan Shepard became the first American in space. Ham survived, was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean, and lived at the National Zoo in Washington for 17 years after his flight. These animals were not just symbols. They were data points that made human spaceflight possible. Every astronaut who flew to the moon stood on the shoulders of creatures who had no idea what they were doing, but did it anyway. Now here is where the story shifts, where the science of what the moon is meets the economics of what it would cost to actually live there. Everything we have described so far, the radiation shielding, the pressurized habitat, the temperature management, the dust control, the water extraction, the food production, every single one of those challenges costs money. Enormous, almost incomprehensible amounts of money. And when you add them all together, you begin to understand why no city has been built on the moon yet. It is not a lack of desire. It is not even a lack of technology. It is the sheer, staggering financial reality of doing something that has never been done before on a world that was never designed for human beings. Let us start with what we already know. The Apollo program, which ran from 1961 to 1972 and successfully landed 12 men on the moon across 6 missions, cost the United States government approximately $25.4 billion at the time. Adjusted for inflation to today's value, that figure comes out to somewhere between $250 billion and $300 billion. The entire Apollo program, every rocket, every spacecraft, every training facility, every launch pad, every mission control room, for the price of one medium-sized modern war. And Apollo did not build anything permanent. The astronauts stayed for a maximum of 3 days at a time, conducted their experiments, collected their samples, planted their flags, and came home. There was no infrastructure left behind. No buildings, no power systems, no permanent human presence of any kind. Just footprints in the dust and a handful of flags bleached white by solar radiation, standing on a world no one has returned to in over 50 years. To build a permanent lunar outpost, not a city, just a small research station capable of housing 6 to 12 people. Current estimates from aerospace engineers and space agency analysts place the cost at somewhere between $30 billion and $100 billion for the initial construction phase alone. This figure includes the cost of developing the heavy lift rockets needed to transport construction materials, the cost of manufacturing habitats capable of withstanding the lunar environment, the cost of life support systems, power generation infrastructure, communications equipment, and the logistics of supplying the station with food and consumables during its early operational years. The Artemis program, which is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's current initiative to return humans to the moon and establish a sustainable presence there, has already spent over $35 billion in development costs as of the early 2020s, and the program is ongoing. The Gateway, a small space station planned to orbit the moon as a staging point for surface missions, is projected to cost an additional $3 to $5 billion to build and deploy. But an outpost is not a city. A city implies permanent population, self-sustaining infrastructure, agriculture, energy production, manufacturing, commerce, and governance. The step from outpost to city is not a linear progression. It is an exponential one. When engineers and economists at organizations like the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the European Space Agency, and private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin sit down to model what a self-sustaining lunar city might cost, they arrive at figures that are genuinely difficult to process. A city capable of housing 1,000 permanent residents, which is a modest city by any earthly standard, barely a small town, is estimated to cost somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion over a 20 to 30-year construction and development timeline. That includes the cost of launching and landing thousands of metric tons of equipment and materials, the cost of building pressurized underground habitats to shield residents from radiation, the cost of establishing nuclear power plants, likely small modular reactors, to provide the continuous electricity needed to run life support systems, and the cost of developing closed-loop agricultural systems capable of growing enough food to feed a permanent population. The cost per person to simply travel to the moon and back today, using the most advanced rockets currently available, is estimated at roughly $50 million per seat on a commercial mission. Elon Musk's company SpaceX, which is developing the Starship vehicle specifically for missions to the moon and Mars, has stated publicly that their goal is to eventually reduce the cost of lunar transit to somewhere between $2 million and $10 million per person. Even at that dramatically reduced price point, sending 1,000 people to the moon would cost between $2 billion and $10 billion in transportation costs alone before a single brick of habitat has been laid. And those people need to eat. They need water. They need air. They need medical care. They need communication with Earth. Every consumable that cannot yet be produced locally on the moon must be shipped from Earth at a cost of roughly $10,000 per pound to reach low Earth orbit, and significantly more to reach the lunar surface. The energy challenge alone is worth dwelling on. A lunar city of 1,000 people would require somewhere between 100 and 500 megawatts of continuous electrical power to maintain life support, lighting, food production, water recycling, and industrial operations. Solar power is available on the moon, but the 354-hour lunar night makes it unreliable without massive battery storage systems or supplementary generation. Small modular nuclear reactors are considered the most viable solution by most aerospace engineers. The United States Department of Energy has been working with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration on a concept called the Fission Surface Power Project, which aims to develop a 10-kilowatt nuclear fission reactor capable of operating on the lunar surface. That system is expected to cost several $100 million to develop and deploy. Scaling that up to the power requirements of a city of 1,000 would require dozens of such units, representing a multi-billion-dollar investment in energy infrastructure alone. When you add it all together, transportation, habitat construction, power generation, life support, food production, medical facilities, communications, research infrastructure, and a contingency budget for the inevitable unexpected costs, a genuine lunar city of 1,000 people would likely cost somewhere in the range of $1 to $2 trillion to establish over a 30-year period. That is roughly the annual gross domestic product of Australia. It is more than the entire United States military budget for 5 consecutive years. It is an amount of money so large that no single nation, and arguably no single generation, could absorb it alone. This is why nearly every serious proposal for a permanent lunar settlement, from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's long-term planning documents to the commercial visions of private aerospace companies, involves international cooperation, phased investment over multiple decades, and a significant contribution from the private sector driven by the commercial value of lunar resources. The helium-3 alone, if fusion energy becomes viable, could be worth trillions of dollars. Rare earth minerals present in the lunar regolith could supply Earth's technology industry for centuries. The moon at this price might actually be a bargain. The moon is not just a destination. It is a test of whether human beings are capable of thinking beyond the boundaries of the world that made them, beyond the comfort, beyond the familiarity, beyond the blue sky they have always taken for granted. Every engineer who has ever modeled a lunar habitat, every scientist who has ever analyzed a gram of lunar regolith, every accountant who has ever stared at a budget spreadsheet and tried to make the numbers work, all of them are part of the same answer to the same ancient question that human beings have been asking since the first time someone looked up at that pale light and felt, deep in their chest, the pull of somewhere else. The moon is waiting. And now you know exactly what it would cost to answer. If this video made you see the moon differently, if you looked up at the night sky tonight and thought about what it would actually take to call that place home, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel was made for. Every week we take the biggest questions in space and give you the honest, unfiltered answers that most channels are afraid to tackle. Hit subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and come back for the next one. Because the universe is enormous, and we're just getting started.